Hi, and welcome to our financial aid presentation, Cracking the Student Funding Nut. First thing I want to do is start off just with giving you a brief overview of Inoapps and who we are. We are a Scottish-based firm, although we do have offices in both Kuala Lumpur and the United States. So there's an international flavor to the organization, but we are very much based in the UK and very strongly focused on EMEA. In addition to that, kind of highlighting the points that we're going to be focusing on today, we believe one of the key things we deliver, in addition to our specialties in higher education and the implementation of student systems, is our industry innovation. We have a research and development group that is based in Linlithgow, just outside Edinburgh, where we have the capability of delivering and developing unique solutions for our customers using Oracle products. Phil, if you want to move on one more. Just to introduce myself, I'm Jennifer Tavano Gallagher. I'm the Higher Education Practice Manager. As you can probably tell by my accent, I was originally American, but I've been based in the UK now for about 15 years. And I have been around most of the UK institutions that use campus solutions. I think I've only missed one on my list, and my colleague who'll be doing the majority of the presentation today has ticked off that one. In addition to the focus that we've had in the UK market, obviously we have a lot of contacts, and through our involvement with the HEUG, I think we have a fairly good understanding of some of the needs and complexities of the rest of Europe and even some of the challenges the African schools are facing. Currently, I'm working on an implementation at the University of Edinburgh of HR and financials, which is actually where the seed of what you're going to see today sort of started out. So one of the things that we as an organization and a practice have put together, primarily for University of Edinburgh, who's implementing Cloud AR, is what we call our Student Funding and Reconciliation solution, which is essentially, for those of you with a campus background, building on the equivalent of kind of the third-party contracts, the sponsorship functionality. So we have been able to take the transactions generated by the university student system, which is non-Oracle, and kind of grab them as they come through the interface into Oracle Financials and trap them, generate some of the other entries that are required to kind of create that third-party relationship. So, you know, crediting the student's account, debiting the sponsor account, and then providing tools to reconcile that information. As that was built, we were talking about how it's very common in the UK and really anywhere outside North America that although Campus Solutions provides a really robust financial aid functionality, it's really too much for anything that we need here in Europe and really even in places like Australia and New Zealand, because our financial aid needs are much simpler. So my colleagues and I started talking around that problem and how we could potentially use some of the existing tools that Oracle gives us to solve that problem, and also create a solution that we could begin by sitting on top of something like Campus Solutions or even a different student system, but then could also easily be moved to Oracle Student Cloud when that's available, as well as something that could be scalable. So you could do either a very small footprint of an implementation and or start expanding it out. So the first step in that process, we thought, was going to be the student funding, identifying what student funding you may be eligible for, and finding out what you would need to make an application, get considered for that, the process of then making the application, and kind of tying that into one almost module or element of the solution. Then the next step we'll be trying to move towards is getting something that once that financial aid is awarded to a particular student, expanding out the funding and reconciliation model we already have that is targeted to things like the student loans company and sponsorship agreements, to a more robust piece of functionality that would actually administer some of the complexities around, for example, stipends, et cetera, and generate the accounting entries that both the student system and potentially the financial system would need. But for right now, we've built the first proof of concept for the basically the finding and the determining of the eligibility of that financial aid. And that's what you're going to see today from my colleague. And he's going to not only show you the direction of travel we're moving in with our proof of concept, but also talk about the tool, talk about the flexibility of the tool and what you could potentially do with it at your institution. And at the very end, talk about some of the other solutions in higher education that we may be using this same tool for. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Phil Wilkinson, who will take you through what we've built so far.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so just a quick introduction of myself. My background is university admissions in the United Kingdom. I was at Liverpool John Moores University for a good 13 years, doing that admission stuff with UCAS and GTCR as it was at the time. Since then, I've also worked at Queen's University Belfast on campus solutions, and since becoming a consultant, I've worked with a number of universities, including Nottingham, Strathclyde and Manchester, and I'm currently working at the University of Edinburgh with Jen on human resources of all things. So the tool that we're going to show you today is the Oracle Intelligence Advisor Cloud. Now, you may have heard this before as the Oracle Policy Automation Process, OPA. This is the new name for it. So it's the same product you may have previously seen on other presentations. It's a powerful cloud-based automated decision-making process. So the idea is that you can feed it a lot of data from wherever that may be. It knows what your policies and processes are. It'll churn through that data you've given it, and it'll pump out a result or several results based on that data, which is the main strength we're using it for in this financial aid eligibility tool. We want to pump a lot of information about the students, either from your student system or from themselves, and then tell them, based on what you've told us, this is what you're going to be eligible for, or eligible to apply for, at least. The language of those rules, it's natural language rules. So there's no JavaScript, there's no C++, it's no people code. It's very much as you would speak in natural language. And we use that deliberately so we can put it around your existing policy documents, which are also likely in natural language. So we can actually base this on your existing Word documents that are on your website, in your internal SharePoints, and put this extra natural language code around your existing text. These rules can be used to deliver self-service tools for your students. So the example we're giving here is literally a self-service tool for your students, so the student can log in themselves and say what I'm eligible for. It can also be used for things like guided agent scripts. So it's exactly the same tool could be given to someone on your financial aid help desk. Someone phones them and they ask the same questions that the student puts themselves online and get the same result. It can also be used for automated decision-making and some complex calculations for your existing systems. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation. One of the most powerful strengths of this system is also it tells you why every single decision that it made was made, or it tells you why the person, for example, didn't meet the criteria or why they did and which bits were missing. So we'll see that as we go through here, and we'll have a look at why the system has decided that this student is not eligible for some and is eligible for others, and why it hasn't been able to make a decision in certain cases as well. So these natural language rules, we've got an example on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see how natural language these are. So the person's fee status is international. The person's nationality is in Great Britain, for example. And the person's planned level of study is not postgraduate course, but it is postgraduate. And you can see these are very, very natural, easy to read rules that you can see how they would build up into a set of policies. And in this case, you can see this person is eligible to apply for a particular scholarship if they meet this set of natural English rules. The rules are based around an object. In this instance, it's a person, because when this tool is actually geared towards any applicants or students or anyone just inquiring whether or not they get eligible for financial aid from your institution. So they may not be a student, they might not be an applicant, it might just be a person. So we've used person in this instance, but they can be any object you want that's relevant to your policies. As I say, they are written in plain English and they use Microsoft Word. When you open the rules document, it opens Microsoft Word. There's a plugin that automatically loads as well, which you will see shortly. And you literally just type away. It's got certain styles you must type in. And you can see here the yellow and the pink colours. They are styles that the system recognises as being certain types of rules or certain levels of rules embedded in your text. The rules can also reference other rules. So we've got here one, for example, that says the person is not an EU national. The system doesn't know what an EU national is. So there's another rule in the same document, which again I'll show you later, which defines what an EU national is, for example. So it is very much a Word document you build up and up and up. You can also have multiple Word documents in the same project that reference each other. And it's a way of organising your rules to make it easy to read and easy to go through. For more complex rules, so here we have the person's fee status, for example, which in particular in the UK, and I'm sure in many other countries around the world, it's a very complex part of the decision-making process to decide what kind of fees the person is going to pay. For those complex rules where there's multiple outcomes, so for example, a person's fee status could be one of 4 or 5 or 6 different results. Again, you just use Microsoft Word and you use a table within Microsoft Word. So here, for example, we said your home UK if all these things are true, or we say EU national, and it goes through in that order as well. So if it calculates that you are eligible for home UK fees in this instance, it will not bother evaluating EU national, islands, international, etc. At the bottom, there's also a default. So if you're not eligible for any of these things, in the UK at least, we tend to say, well, you're international then, because that's the highest fee we can provide you, and we'd rather tell you that your fees are lower than higher later on. So this is how you structure these complex rules. You put a table in. Again, the plugin for Microsoft Word does all this for you. You say you want to do a rules table. It puts the rules in the right style and lets you build it out. Again, using this natural English language. So you can see here, for example, if you're UK, the person is not an EU national, but they do live in the UK. And either they're residents in the UK and an UK national, or they are all of the following things. They are not UK national, but have a certain immigration status. So you can use, and you can see, even though there is a couple of key words in there, you can tell either and all are key words. It's also very easy to read and understand what they're actually doing. You can also use, in terms of complex calculations, all the normal mathematical operands. So plus, minus, divide. You do all that kind of stuff. You can plug in JavaScript as well to do really complex rules. At that point, obviously, you get your developers involved, but you basically do the majority of what you want in these really easy to read natural language rules. In terms of data structures that then get created, store your data and carry out your calculations. Every time you type something into that Word document and click save, so for example, the person's gender is whatever, that rule is automatically imported into OIA. So you can see here on the right-hand side, you have a list of attributes that have been derived by the tool from your Microsoft Word documents. So every time you put something into those documents, it says this rule is dependent on the person's age, the person's fee status. The system will say, well, I expect then I'll need an input to gather that information from somewhere. So it automatically generates that. The things that have got stars next to them are goals. So for example, we have the offer the person holds is a goal. It's going to calculate that from other data. It's not going to get imported or inserted in just a straightforward bit of text. It's going to have to calculate that. And the input, so the input you see on the right-hand side are direct inputs by the user or a system, which then feed into other rules of calculations. And then we can also use something called entities, which allow you to collect multiple sets of information about a particular object. So the example in the FA funding rules might be, we want you to tell us about your children, if you've got children. So you've got 3 children, we want to tell you about all 3 of them. And that would be then become a child entity or your child entity, which is a child entity application, but also be called child. And then you could collect a different date of birth, different name, a different address about each of those 3 children. In terms of how we collect that data from you or from your students or from your systems, the system comes with the Oracle Intelligence Advisor Cloud Hub. And that allows you to actually expose an interview screen built using the tool directly. And that's what you're seeing on the right-hand side here and what we're going to see today. So this is a tool that we've built using Oracle Intelligence Advisor, and we'd literally push this out into the cloud for students to access and fill in the data. That's the easiest and sort of most straightforward way of exposing the advice to your customers. However, it comes inbuilt with APIs that come with Oracle AI, and you can deliver that interview through any method you deem necessary. So we can plug it into your student portal and you build your own front end, and the data will be collected by the student portal and pushed into the interview for it to make a decision. You can also plug it into your mobile device. So if you've got a mobile app, again, as long as you've got the APIs built, the system, your mobile app can push data in and get results back. Chatbots is a very powerful option for it. So you can build a chatbot which asks the student lots of questions, and it'll use the Intelligence Advisor to make a decision on the data that's given to the chatbot. And we can also do direct feeds on those systems. So we can have your student system literally be triggered to push information into the Oracle Intelligence Advisor and get a response back, which it will then store in a table within the student system. It's also, although we call it Intelligent Cloud, it's also actually intelligent data collection as well. So as it goes through collecting information from the student, if it makes a decision at any point, actually, I've got all the information I need to satisfy all the goals, it will actually stop asking questions or stop asking questions it doesn't need answers to. So it only displays the questions that are actually relevant to the goals that are remaining to be calculated. You can also configure the display based on other input calculations or rules. So you can say, only shows question if they've answered another question a certain way, and it's literally just clicking buttons. There's no configuration involved in terms of technical configuration. You're literally just saying, show this if this, or make this mandatory if this, or optional if this, or make it even read only if this is other answers true. The interview also can end once all the goals and calculations are completed, even if there are more questions yet to be answered. So it literally say there's a whole screen with 20 more questions on it, but I've already decided the person's not eligible for anything based on what you told me so far. So I'm going to end the interview here and stop rather than waste their time. I'm going to tell them the answer is no straight away rather than waste their time. And you can configure that so you can switch that on or off as well. So as Jen mentioned at the start, what we have built is this financial aid advisor. It's a pre-configured but hugely flexible financial aid advisor tool for your applicants. We can very easily be adapted to work for students or full-age officers, but the way we've come at it today is an applicant filling it in as part of their application process. We've built it so it collects relevant information from them about their education, their planned studies, their planned studies institution, or obviously you could pull that from their application. Their citizenship, which again you could pull from the application if it's there, as well as the widening participation or access information that might be relevant to whether or not they get certain scholarships. And what this does is it collects all the information from them, and you can see an example of the screen on the right there, but I will give a demo in a few moments, runs that through the institution's eligibility rules, and then advises which financial aid, if any, the applicant might be eligible to apply for. As Jen mentioned, the next step for us would then be putting an application form on the back of this as well. So let's go to the demo. I'm hoping you can all still see my screen. Please shout if you can't. Okay, so this is the policy modeling tool. It's a desktop client. Although you upload it into the cloud to actually be stored and link up to your APIs, etc., it's actually built on your desktop. And part of that reason is because it uses Microsoft Word to actually build the rules. This also allows several people to work on it at once, and the results will all be collaborated on in the cloud as well. So all I'm going to show you today is the desktop tool, not the cloud tool. And you can see here that we've built a financial aid advisor interview. We've got lots of screens which expand on the left here. So the final one, for example, is good news or bad news. We've also got these screens collecting different bits of information about the applicant. And what I'm going to do is quickly go into the data tab. And you can see here's all the information it's going to collect. You saw a brief screenshot of this during the presentation. All the information it's going to collect from the person as part of the interview. And down here, you've got a set of goals or joining goals, which means they feed into another goal as well. So all the scholarships they might be eligible for, which are all based on rules. And I'll show you those rules in a few moments. But first of all, let's launch the interview as it comes out of what we've built so far. This is the debugger. It comes with a tool which allows you to test that your rules are making sense, allows you to test that everything's coming out the way you expect it to, but also allows you very quickly to see why it's not. So if I just drag this out of the way so you can't see it. And over here, you can see, for example, here's all the data I'm going to collect as part of the interview. It's all currently set to unknown because I haven't given any answers yet at all. There's no decisions being taken. It's all unknown. So the first thing I'm going to do over here is put my name in and click start. So you can see straight away on the data tab, it's already collected my first bit of information. It now knows my name is Phil. It's going to use that throughout the interview. So rather than saying dear applicant, it's going to say hi Phil, for example. You can see that on the first screen here. It's already said hi Phil. Now, the ultimate aim of this is that we'd actually grab the information from the person's application rather than making them enter it all again. We haven't got that linked up, but as you see here, if I click yes, that's UCAS, just so people know, is not from the UK. It's the UK's universal application system for undergraduates universities. So I'm going to say yes here, just briefly. At that point, it would then say, well, tell us more. We need to secure, we need to make sure you are who you say you are. So give us your name, your full name, your date of birth, and UCAS ID, so we can go and grab the information about you from your application. In this instance, we haven't got that. So we're going to say we haven't applied. So it's then going to say, right, well, in that case, I need to ask you about information. And you can see here, it's now skipped this page, tells about your application. It's skipped that because it knows you've said, I haven't applied. So it doesn't need to show us that. So let's just say we want to start in September next year. We want to start undergraduate. We want to do a language. Let's say we want to do mathematics full-time, and we don't currently hold an offer. So if I go to the data screen over here, you can see it's collecting a lot of information already. So I haven't applied for admissions, doesn't know my surname because I haven't given it to them, doesn't know my date of birth. It knows when I want to start. It knows I don't hold an offer. And if I scroll down to here, there's already a lot of scholarships that are ruled out immediately. So it knows I can't apply for postgraduate scholarships because I've said I want to be undergraduate. So straight away, it's done that. If I right click on any of these, such as the Morris Foundation, and say show decision, it says here, I'm not eligible to apply for the Morris Foundation scholarship because my level of study is undergraduate. And that's it. It says that's immediately out of the picture. So let's carry on. I'm going to say I'm from the United Kingdom. I also live in the United Kingdom. Live in England. And now I was born here. So let's go into that. I'm going to say that I'm applying for the student loan company. Household income is that. Right, and here's another example of a more complex screen. So we've got here, it's asking us what we call in the UK protected characteristics, but basically personal information about stuff that might make the person eligible for more specific funding. They can opt out this section overall by clicking this button, and then it will hide everything and say we can carry on. If I don't click that, it's going to say, well, hang on, you have to answer all these questions. And you can see each of these questions I've already put in the would rather not say on all of these. So I'm going to say yes for that one. I'm going to say rather not say for that one. I've not been in care. I'm white, British. I am, yes. I'm going to say that I'm male. And I'm not pregnant. Okay. And the last question it's going to ask is a bit more about my education. And because I'm undergraduate, it's tailored the questions about me being undergraduate to me as an undergraduate. So it's not asking about postgraduate degrees. It's not asking me about my previous undergraduate study because it assumes that I'm not applying for that. Although obviously that's just the rules that we have built in to start with. This can be very much tailored to the questions that would be needed for a particular institution. So I'm going to say that I've got a GCSE grade C higher and I've never studied undergraduate before. And next. And there we go. So it's telling me now, congratulations, based on the information you've given us, you should be eligible to apply for the following funding. So it's telling me I'm eligible for childcare grant, I'm eligible for something called the Ambassador Scholarship, Chancellor's Fund, as well as University Additional Support Fund. So that's based on the information that I've given it. And if I go into the data, you can see down here, there's very few unknowns now. The only things that are unknown are things it hasn't asked me. So it didn't ask me if I said that postgraduate before, because I was applying for undergraduate degree. So it made the assumption that I wouldn't have applied to postgraduate before. A lot of questions up here, they hasn't asked me about EU because I'm not from the EU. For example, postgraduate target qualification, it hasn't asked me, it doesn't need to. So there's lots of stuff it hasn't asked me. But if I come down to why I'm eligible to apply for certain things like the Inoapps Chancellor Scholarship, it's telling me that my level is undergraduate. I'm looking to start in the right year. I haven't studied undergraduate before. I'm from the home UK fee status wise. I've got a low household income and I'm looking to apply for funding from the SLC. So based on all of that, I am now eligible to apply for this particular Chancellor's Fund. So what I'm going to do now just go back to the start and look at how easy it is to actually make this, how easy it is to make this more flexible for whoever wants to use it. So let's say, for example, that a critical part of your financial aid operations is actually you'd like to know who these people are with an email address, so you can follow up with them and say, look, you were eligible to apply for stuff. You haven't done so yet. So we want to collect this person's email address as well as their first name at the start. It's really easy to do that. So I'm going to go into data, and this is the bits of data I'm collecting. I'm going to insert a new bit of data by clicking this new attribute button. I'm going to say the person's, spell it right, email address. It's a text, and you can see down here, the system has already decided, well, based on that, it's a nice natural English bit of information. It's saying, right, so the question is, what is the person's email address? The answer is, the person's email address is whatever they insert. Now, you can put stuff like input validations, make sure it's the email address is structured correctly. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can understand that would just simply be saying, has it got an at sign? Has it got the dot after the at sign, for example? So I'm going to say yes. Okay. So that has dropped. I did see it drop in. There we go. So it's a goal, which means it's an input, but it's not feeding anything else. There's no rules based on it. It's just an input. That's the ultimate goal is the input itself. And all I do now is go onto the interview screen and say, right, I want to put this after my first name. I'm going to do a new input, and the system says, right, the only bit of information that you've asked us to collect, you're not currently collecting, is the person's email address. So you can just double click it. And there we go. I'm going to change the text. And obviously, you could also put text underneath here to say that what you'll use it for, your privacy statements, etc. You could have another box so you could validate that the two email addresses are equal, make sure it's typed in correctly. But at the moment, that email address is mandatory. And you can see here, I could say always show it. It's never read-only. It's never optional. Now, you could, if it was based on other rules, you could say it's optional if, for example, all the other information you're collecting, it's optional if any of this is true, for example. But at the moment, we're saying the email address is mandatory. It's always going to be shown. If I launch a debugger again, you'll see now they will not let me move on from this page without filling in both those fields. For example, now it moves on, and you can see then the data, it has collected my name, and it has now also collected my email address. Another thing you might want to do, which the system allows you to do if you're using the interview as your collection tool rather than an external system, you can also do things like plug in capture, for example, to say, right, we want to make sure bots aren't doing this, so we'll put in a capture tool before you can move on, for example, as well. We'll delete that for now. Okay, so let's just move into having a look at what these rules look like in the Word documents. So you can see here I've got multiple rules. I've got a rules document per scholarship to make it easier to edit those over time. I've got general FA advisor rules. I've got the application rules, which we didn't get to, but I'll get to that before the end. Let's have a look at the general advisor rules first, just see how easy it is to build these things. Just take a second because it's plugging in the Microsoft Word plugin. There we go. Okay, so here's my set of general rules. These aren't specific to any particular scholarship. They're just general rules about the person. So you can see here, very simple one. The person is UK national if their nationality is GB, or they have a dual nationality and their dual nationality is GB, for example. You've got this one here, which says they are residents in the UK if their country of residence is GB, and they've been in the UK for a suitable period of time. And the important bit is the system doesn't know what that means. So we build another rule below it, which says the person's been in the UK for a suitable amount of time if they were born in the UK or they entered the UK more than 3 years ago, for example. You can see here, there's not an awful lot of complexity to make these things and build these rules up. You can see I've obviously used an operation there to work out the difference between the years. They're all in documentation, but these aren't very complicated. Down here, for example, they're EU national if their nationality is one of the 28 UK nations, or they've got dual nationality, again, one of the 28 EU nations. So all these rules are in here. Here's our fee status rules. You can see here the home EU National, Islands, International, and then you've got otherwise at the bottom. So if you don't read any of these, we're going to assume International for the time being. And lots of other rules as well about your sponsorship. So we're saying that you are sponsored if you have an employer or a family member sponsoring you, for example. You've declared your household income if it's greater than 0. You're from the Commonwealth if you're from one of these nations, which took me a long time to type in. And you've also got down here at the bottom then, the big rule is you're eligible to apply for a scholarship, which shows the final screen of the tool if you're eligible to apply for any of the scholarships. So it's sort of building all those up into one rule, which says, I'm going to show you the screen if you're eligible to apply for any of our scholarships in the list. And obviously, that's the list of scholarships can be as big or as small as it needs to be. So let's close that one and open up one of our scholarships. So let's say we're going to open up one of the ones we were eligible for, which was the Student Ambassador Scholarship. So again, really, really simple set of rules for this one. You are eligible to apply for the Ambassador Scholarship if, one, you're either from the EU or the UK, and you're studying for an undergraduate degree, and your fee status is home UK or EU national, and you're looking to start next year. So it's a really simple set of rules to decide if you're eligible to apply for this, and hopefully that's really easy for you to see how easy it is to read these rules off the screen, how easy to build them. What we're going to do then is show how easy it is to insert another rule into this. So this isn't a piece of data we're collecting right now. We're going to have to go and put this into our interview, but hopefully it'll demonstrate how it works. So let's say, and the person does not have a criminal record. So you're going to be a university ambassador. We want to make sure you haven't got a criminal record, just for argument's sake. Save that. That rule's in. When you close it, it'll tell you if there's any problems. It will come with a message at the top here. So that rule was fine. It has validated it. It was fine. If you go into the data tab, if we sort these by alphabetical order, you should be able to see somewhere. Here we go. So it's automatically determined from our Word document that we need a new input. The person has a criminal record. So the question is, does the person have a criminal record? It's a Boolean, so it's a yes/no value based on what the system has calculated that based on the question, there should be a yes/no value. And the answer will be either they do or they don't, or it doesn't know yes if he hasn't asked the question. So you can see how intelligent the system is, that it's actually taking your natural language question and turn that into an attribute that it will collect. Now, if you wanted to say, rather than yes, no, it's going to be a text. So you might want to, I don't want to say option, for example. You can obviously choose text, and you might have to tweak your question. And you can see there, based on text, the question doesn't make much sense now, and you can go and tweak that, for example. But let's leave it as Boolean for now. You can also edit these, so you can do a custom Boolean and edit what the question, the positive and negative answers look like, what the explanations look like, which explain why it's called the answer it does. But let's leave it all as default for now. Okay. And let's go into our interview. So we're going to assume that this is going to be a new page for the time being. So let's insert a new screen. Criminal record screen. And the input on the screen is going to be, do you have a criminal record? And again, obviously you can put lots of text around this. You can, new labels you can put in here, which might explain why collecting information, what it's for, what you might class as criminal record. So from my experience with admissions, you have a lot of people say they have a criminal record if they've had a traffic violation. So you can say, right, we'll get rid of that. And that's our simple question, just in there. So let's just go back to the start. That question is now in. Let's go debug and go through this again. So still looking September next year. Still looking for undergraduates. Mathematics. So here's our new screen popping up straight away. It's popping up because it's relevant. If it already knew that I was not eligible to apply for the undergraduate scholarships, which bear in mind, we plugged this into the Ambassador Scholarship, which was undergraduate. It wouldn't ask me this question. Let's test it, fingers crossed. So I'm going to say I'm actually applying for a postgraduate research degree instead. I think I'll still ask it. That's wonderful, isn't it? I need to go and tweak some settings on that. But the idea is that if it wasn't relevant, it already knew that I wasn't eligible to apply for the Ambassador Scholarship. It wouldn't ask that question anymore. Let's just say I am. I've got criminal records. I'm applying for the United Kingdom. Sorry, I live in the United Kingdom. I live in England. So I'm answering exactly the same I did before, just to check that it actually then tells me I'm no longer eligible for that. Answer the same way I did before. Okay, so you can see now it has dropped off the Ambassador Scholarship for me. So you're giving me 3 now rather than 4 like I did previously. And again, if I go to the data and scroll down and look for the Ambassador Scholarship, here it is. It now says false next to it. I am not eligible to apply for the Ambassador Scholarship. If I click on that, it'll tell me I'm not eligible because I have a criminal record. And if I click on untick this, you can see actually I was relevant, I was meeting the other criteria. It's just this one I haven't met. So the next step of this would then be to have an application on the back of this. So you can see here, I've got the apply for funding button. I'll click on that. The assumption would then be, in our tool at least so far, the way we configured it is that we're not going to waste time assessing applications for funding if you haven't applied yet. So it's going to say, have you applied to UCAS or directly to university? If yes, and then again, this is based on the fact you haven't told us up front. If you told us up front in the first question you had already applied and given us information, it wouldn't ask again. But for the purpose of this, we haven't done, so it's going to ask you for that information. Or directly to university, it can ask you my university application number. Or I can say not yet, in which case they're going to say, well, you know what, you need to go and do that first before you apply for funding. You need to go and actually apply to university. As I say, this whole form is based around the concept that you have applied, you're applying, you're not already a student, although you can see how easy it would be to tweak that these questions or even the whole tool to be geared towards students rather than applicants or even both. You can have different sets of screens appearing for applicants versus students as well within this very easily. So I'm going to close this down. Okay, let's go back to my presentation. Okay, so that's a quick demonstration of what we have built so far. Obviously, that is based around our experiences of how these things are calculated. It's going to vary hugely between different institutions, depending on different scholarships you've got. You might need to collect a whole load more information than we've asked so far. And obviously, the rules for what constitutes a home student versus international student will vary between institutions around the world, for example. I know in the US, you also have the in-state, out-of-state rules built in as well. So in terms of what we're doing next with this particular tool, is that what we want to do is actually configure calculations needed to work out not just you'll get an award, but also what that award will be worth based on your student fees, for example. So that would actually either feed information coming from the student system or from the student themselves, saying what are your actual fees, and most likely we'll go and grab that for you from your application, for example. And based on that, we're going to tell you that actually the scholarship you're eligible to apply for will be worth this amount of money if you were successful. As Jen mentioned at the start, we also want to tie it into our student funding investigation cloud. So we can actually say, apply for funding using our tool. So check your eligibility, apply for the funding, and either by pushing this into a CRM tool rather, or by building the policies into our system automatically, if it decides that you're actually successful in your application, let's actually push that into your student system, into your financial system, and start setting up the sponsorship transactions, setting up the SLC transactions, all that kind of stuff, setting up on your behalf to move the money around, move the debt around, apply the scholarships, for example. So that's the next step we want to do as well. And as I say, that also obviously feeds from the idea of building out the application phase of that project. So asking the student or the applicant for a lot more information, taking out the optional bits, depending on what they're applying for, and actually saying, right, we're going to calculate your eligibility now for the actual award and push it through our policies and award that if you're eligible. Other applications that we think that we're quite excited about building out with this, other than tying into that cloud, which I just mentioned then, we also see it's really useful as a level progression rules, for example. So pumping information from the student system around what program they're on, what the rules are around that program, what marks they've achieved on their level 1 modules, level 2 modules, level 3 modules, for example, and deciding, are you eligible to progress from one year of the program to the other, and putting those into your, building those policies in this intelligence advisor and pushing information out into intelligence advisor and getting yes, no response or whatever response back from this application, and feed it back into the system and saying to the student, right, you're eligible to progress to the next level of your program, for example. Same sort of concept with the classification rules. So deciding what type of degree you're getting. Are you getting a first, a 2-1, a 2-2? Are you getting a merit, distinction, or pass for your master's? So again, if we push all the information out into the intelligence advisor and ensure that the intelligence advisor knows what the rules are for classifications on your particular program, there's no reason why that couldn't very quickly and very flexibly calculate, well, what is the outcome of that classification? And what we're aiming to do there is avoiding, or rather recognizing that in the future, some of the cloud-based student systems may not be as flexible in terms of building the customizations you need to calculate those things, but also recognizing that when you do build those things, even in Campus Solutions or Banner or SITS or whatever it is, they tend to be hugely complex bits of code that need a lot of maintenance over the years. And you can see how easy it would be to maintain those in this tool in a simple Word document or even Excel sheet. You can use Excel instead as well for this, to have those classification rules built up in here and running as you need them. It would also be really easy to expose that to the student and say, here's a tool which will tell you what you need to do in your final year, for example, to get a 2-1 or a first, based on what we know about you from your first 1 or 2 years study. So what you're going to get based on what you've done so far and what you hope to do in the upcoming year or years. What might you get from that? Based on our admissions backgrounds, in the UK at least, we know that every results Thursday, which is when the school students get their A-level results, for example, or Scottish Highers or Irish Highers, whatever it is. How about a tool which they can log into and say, have I got into university? So rather than phoning someone at university and speaking to someone to say, have I got in, that person having to do all that conversation, you can literally have a student-facing intelligent advisor console which says, right, tell us who you are. We'll validate that you are who you say you are based on something like date of birth and UCAS personal ID and whatever else you might want to take off them. I'm going to go run away to the student system, find out if you're in, and come back and tell you you're in, and tell you what the next steps might be. So you expect to receive an enrollment pack. How do you apply for accommodation if you came through clearing, for example? Here's how you apply for funding, your financial aid, for example. Here's where we expect you to arrive at university. So you can build that out and take the pressure, particularly during these current times when you may not have as many staff on the phones available to speak to people on results day. How do we, this system could help by saying to students, we're going to do the simple bit, yes, no. We're going to push the people I can't answer yes, no into the actual phone lines, for example. And more than that, the auditing would also like to see very quickly, why has the system said yes to a student? Are our policies wrong? Has a student given us the wrong information? That kind of information. And the final one the final idea we've had off the top of our heads here is the fee evaluation. So working out what your fees actually are. And this is obviously most relevant to, this is relevant to applicants who might be going through the application form. So it might say, well, based on what it's applied for, based on your fee status, based on where you're applying from, for example, and all the discounts you might get for that, we're going to calculate your fee and stick it on your application, we're going to stick it on your offer letter. So all the information gets pushed out of the admission system into our intelligence advisor, and the result gets pushed back, which may be one single figure, but it could also be lots of figures breaking down how it's been worked out to go on to your communication generation, for example. The other thing is that as part of your student system implementation, it might be that your student system isn't flexible enough to do everything you want to do with the delivered tools available to you to calculate your tuition fees. And again, you could potentially push more complex and more bespoke calculations into the intelligence advisor to do those bits for you and push back a figure to be used in your calculations.